Machiavellian intelligence. Make people follow without question. The illusion of control. What if the freedom you feel is actually a carefully crafted illusion? You think you're making your own choices, but emotions, fears, and unspoken desires are silently guiding you. This video isn't just about manipulation. It's about the invisible strings that shape your identity, your beliefs, and even your sense of purpose. Through the lens of depth psychology, we'll explore how emotions, not logic, often drive our lives, and how awakening begins not with resistance, but with awareness. Because the most dangerous kind of control is the one that makes you feel free. When you think you're in control, but you're actually being led. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, what am I really living for? Am I following my own will, or am I simply playing out a pre-written script? The most subtle form of manipulation doesn't come through commands, it comes through emotion. People don't have to control you directly. They just have to implant a feeling, fear of being left behind, hunger for recognition, anxiety over missed opportunities, or the craving to be loved. And then you act, you think you're choosing, but you're merely reacting to emotions that have been engineered. Modern society teaches us that the more control we have over the external world, the freer we are. But Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakens." The more you try to control others, situations, and outcomes, the more you become trapped in the illusion of power. True freedom begins only when you dare to look inward and ask, what is really driving me that I haven't seen yet? You don't need to become someone who controls others. You just need to stop letting others control you unconsciously. That's when you finally begin to live your own life, not as a puppet of emotions, expectations, or systems. Real manipulation doesn't speak, it whispers through emotion. Those who are manipulated don't always follow a command. They act, not because they're forced to, but because they want to. They think they're choosing freely. But in truth, they're following a planted emotion, one that was silently seeded. The most skillful manipulation doesn't require words. It doesn't attack your willpower. It slips quietly into your most vulnerable emotions. It doesn't come from a loud voice, but from a subtle glance that makes you feel you need to prove yourself, a compliment that keeps you chasing validation, a silence that leaves you spinning in unnamed guilt. And the most painful part, the manipulated don't even realize they're being manipulated because everything feels like it belongs to them. The emotions feel real. The decisions seem voluntary, but those very emotions are what's being controlled. Not your actions, but the invisible motives behind them. Emotions don't just guide behavior, they reshape your reality. When you feel abandoned, you believe you're not good enough, even if it's not true. When you feel loved, you're willing to do anything, even if it means losing yourself. Manipulation begins at the place where humans least expect it, emotion. If you don't learn to observe your own emotions, you'll keep reacting to the waves others create. People don't need to control you. They just need to touch the right fear, the right hope, the right emptiness inside you. To be free, you don't need to resist others. You need to clarify which emotions are truly yours and which were created to lead you somewhere else. True leaders never need to give orders. You may think that power belongs to those who command, those who speak loudly, who control every situation by force. But that's just the surface. A shallow view held by those who don't truly understand human psychology. The most deeply influential people rarely speak much. They don't force you to do anything. They don't need threats. They don't even need to be constantly present. They only need to awaken something within you that makes you act voluntarily because you believe you're doing it for yourself. A teacher who sparks your curiosity will make you learn more than one who demands it. It's someone who makes you feel important, has more power than someone who demands obedience. A person who gives you the sense that this is your path will guide you further than someone who tries to push you. Here lies the secret. People can resist commands, but rarely do they resist their own emotions. When you feel like you're in control, you open up more. When you believe an idea is yours, you'll defend it more fiercely than anything. That's how true leaders operate. They don't control your actions, they influence your sense of self from within. We often believe power comes from fear, but the most sustainable power comes from silent agreement when others see you as part of the goal they pursue, part of the person they want to become. And if you've ever followed someone not because they were right, not because they were better, but simply because they made you feel more meaningful by standing beside them, then you understand influence doesn't come from voice. It comes from the way someone reaches your deepest self. The invisible dance of psychology. When you walk the path they want, without knowing it, most people are not controlled by explicit commands, but by a vague feeling, a gentle touch on the unconscious. The most effective manipulation doesn't use force. It's like a dance where the one being led believes they're leading. Subtle manipulation doesn't provoke resistance. It makes you feel safe, chosen, free. You're not pulled, you walk on your own, believing you're doing the right thing, the rational thing, even something authentically you. But the truth lies beneath the surface. You act not because of logic, but because a certain emotion has been touched. You believe you've chosen, but in fact you've been flowing along a hidden stream in your mind, a glance that makes you feel important, a timely phrase that makes you want to prove yourself, a perfectly placed silence that sends you searching for affirmation. It's a delicate choreography between the planter and the receiver, between emotional suggestion and unconscious response. The manipulator doesn't need to drag you along. They just create the empty space within you, and you will fill it with your own steps. What makes manipulation so dangerous is not the coercion, it's the unconscious consent. When you can no longer distinguish between your true will and the influence implanted in you, you begin to live a life that's not your own, but a reflection of someone else's design. Awakening isn't a grand act. It's that quiet moment when you pause in the middle of the dance and ask, where am I really going? And who invited me into this spin? You don't need to control. Everyone, just influence the right person. You don't need to manipulate the whole world to be dangerous. You only need to touch the right people, those who are emotionally vulnerable on the inside, those who are silently yearning to be guided, even if they don't admit it. In every crowd, there are people searching for meaning to follow, a model to mirror, a decision to lean on. They may appear strong, independent, resilient, but deep down, they're confused. They're tired of carrying the burden of always being themselves. And for that reason, they're easier to reach if you know how to trigger the right kind of emotion. The most easily manipulated people are not intellectually weak, but emotionally uncertain. They don't lack knowledge. They lack inner grounding. They don't lack reasoning. They lack the feeling of being heard, seen, and valued. You cannot manipulate someone who truly knows themselves, but you can easily manipulate someone who is living with unnamed emptiness. These people aren't waiting for a commander. They're waiting for a feeling that makes them feel safe. And that's why manipulation is dangerous. It doesn't target logic, it targets unhealed emotional wounds. A fear of abandonment, a belief of not being good enough, a past scar touched again without anyone realizing it. If you want to influence others, you don't need to persuade them. You just need to understand where they're hurting and make them believe you hold the answer. That's all it takes. But from here, a question arises like a warning. Whom are you touching and what are you planting in them? When your ideas actually come from someone else, we often believe we're living according to our own ideals, that the things we believe in, fight for, and protect to the end come from our personal identity, our independent thinking. But if you stop and look deeper, you might discover something surprising. Many of the ideas in your mind aren't truly yours. They were planted long ago through extremely subtle means, a seemingly harmless remark, a film that instilled an idealized image, a friend who made you feel ashamed if you disagreed, a message repeated so often it became truth without ever being questioned. When an idea is introduced to your mind indirectly, without pressure, you tend to believe it's a natural conclusion of your own thinking, and that's when you start defending it. You fight for it. You shape your identity around it without ever realizing its root doesn't come from you, but from someone else. Psychology calls this process internalization, when we absorb an external value without realizing it doesn't truly belong to us. It sneaks in like a seed, and once it sprouts, it becomes part of our identity. You can't live authentically if you don't know what within you is authentic, and you cannot be free if you're living according to things others want you to believe are yours. This isn't an accusation, it's an invitation. Return to your mind and examine it. Every idea you carry, is it still relevant? Is it something you chose or something you merely accepted? Do you defend it because you believe in it or because you're afraid of the emptiness that would come if you let it go? Freedom begins the moment you dare to ask, what is truly my voice? The silent division that renders resistance powerless. History is filled with uprisings, but what causes a rebellion to fail isn't always the strength of the oppressor. It's often the lack of unity within the rebels themselves. You don't need to destroy a group from the outside if they begin to doubt each other from within. A skewed glance, a passing rumor, a minor distinction. That's all it takes to plant seeds of suspicion. And suspicion, when left unhealed, grows into division. This is the oldest tactic of every manipulative force. Divide and conquer, not with violence, but with subtle strokes of the ego. Who's more competent? Who deserves recognition? Who is secretly betraying the cause? And from those questions, trust begins to crack. People who once shared the same goal start scrutinizing each other, debating who is right and who is wrong, instead of remembering they were once on the same side in the end. The anger is redirected not at the one controlling them, but at their fellow companions. The most effective way to destroy a collective is not to attack it, but to make its members feel threatened by one another. Politicians, rulers, even media powers use this strategy expertly. No force is needed, just a whisper of rivalry. No suppression required, just the awakening of instinctive self-defense. And once individuals start turning on each other, they no longer have enough trust to stand together against what's oppressing them. To build real collective strength, you must learn to recognize the seeds of division and, more importantly, stay grounded enough not to fall into the trap. Because when you let personal emotion override the shared mission, you weaken the very thing you're trying to protect. It's emotion that drives action, not logic. As you think you're a rational being, you believe the choices you make each day, who you trust, what you pursue, how you act, are carefully thought out and guided by logic. But in reality, you act based on emotion and use logic afterward to justify it. Your mind isn't as neutral as you think. It's distorted by memory, emotion, past wounds, and unresolved experiences. When you make choices, you believe you're analyzing, but you're actually reacting to something that once hurt you, once made you long, once made you feel inadequate. A fear of being left behind can keep you clinging to a toxic relationship. You should end. A desire for approval can push you into exhausting decisions just to please others. A childhood wound can make you afraid to chase what you truly want, because deep down, you believe you're not worthy. Emotion, especially unspoken, unnamed emotion, is the hidden guide behind all behavior. And a skilled manipulator never argues with logic. They tap into your feelings. They don't need to out-reason you. They only need to awaken a fear, a longing, a void within you that hasn't been filled. You won't act because something is right. You'll act because it feels right. And when that feeling is planted from the outside, your actions no longer belong to you. True freedom doesn't come from having a strong mind, but from understanding the emotions within. When you know what's driving you and are willing to face it, you become far less vulnerable to outside control. Only when you see emotion as the true engine can you begin to live consciously. Otherwise, you're merely reacting to impulses you don't even understand. The thin line between influence and dangerous manipulation. Influence is a natural ability. All of us influence others every day through our words, our gaze, our attitude, or even just our presence. But the danger begins when influence turns into manipulation, and that line is thinner than you think. You can inspire someone, or you can make them act the way you want by touching a fear they've never named. You can help others see themselves, or you can implant an image that makes them lose who they are. You can offer a sense of freedom, or you can make someone feel like they're choosing while you're the one setting the path. The difference lies not in technique, but in intention. Influence stems from a desire to uplift. Manipulation arises from a need to control. When you manipulate others, you don't truly believe they can decide for themselves. You need their obedience to feel worthy. And the most brutal part is this: the better you become at manipulation, the less you believe in the authenticity of anything, even love, trust, or free will. You begin to question everyone around you. Did they do that because they wanted to, or because I made them think they wanted to? And then you no longer know what's real within yourself. Either the manipulator is ultimately consumed by the very game they created. Be cautious with the power you hold. When you know how to steer someone's emotions, you're holding a blade, it can clear a path, or it can cut into the deepest layers of trust. So the question is no longer can you influence, but are you conscious enough to take responsibility for the influence you create? The illusion of invincibility. When the manipulator becomes their own victim, once you become skilled at steering others' emotions, you may begin to believe you're invincible. Every word you speak causes a ripple. Every move you make is calculated. You can read minds, even manipulate reactions like pieces on a chessboard, and soon you believe you stand above others, above everything. But the moment you think you're in control of everything is the moment you lose control first. History is filled with master manipulators, politicians, evangelists, leaders who could make millions believe in the visions they painted. And then one day, a single unexpected event, an unplanned emotion, a slight disruption is enough to collapse the entire system they so carefully constructed. Because there's one thing they could never control: the chaos of human nature. You can calculate, but you can't foresee awakening. You can implant emotion, but you can't extinguish the instinct to question. You can make others believe in you, but you can't make them never doubt themselves. No matter how skilled, every manipulator must face a truth. People change, and when someone starts to question, to reflect, to feel off without knowing why, the entire manipulation starts to crack from within. And more dangerously, the manipulator slowly loses themselves. They no longer know which emotions are real, which compliments are sincere, which love is genuine. They live in a world where every connection might be just a product of their own design. And that doesn't make them stronger, it makes them lonelier than anyone else. Invincibility is a myth, and sometimes the most masterful manipulation is merely the perfect disguise for a soul long lost. Changing the world doesn't require logic, just one powerful emotion. Most of us believe reason is the path to progress, that if we want to change people, change society, change the world, we need sharp arguments, convincing data, undeniable facts. But history proves the opposite. Revolutions don't start with logic. They begin with emotions that have been suppressed for too long. Influential leaders don't move people with knowledge, but with the power to awaken something smoldering inside their audience. You can tell someone what is right, but they'll only take action when they feel that it's intolerable not to. When an emotion is strong enough, whether anger, hope, sorrow, or inspiration, it can override all reasoning and shatter every barrier. That's why manipulators don't try to win your logic. They tap into your emotional core. They make you feel like you belong to something greater. They make you ache for a collective pain, or fear a future not yet real. And when that emotion rises, you begin to fight, to speak up, to sacrifice, not because of logic, but because that feeling defines who you are. People don't protect the truth, they protect what makes them feel like someone's beliefs are tied to identity, to memory, to community, to unhealed loneliness. And when a belief touches those parts, it becomes untouchable. If you want to change someone, don't tell them they're wrong, make them feel forgotten, betrayed. Stirred emotion is what turns an idea into a life, what turns a philosophy into a flame. And so, the one who holds emotion is the one who truly holds power. 3 mind programming techniques no one warns you about. You think your mind is free, that you make decisions each day based on reason, knowledge, and personal choice. But there are 3 subtle ways in which society and influential people can program your mind without you ever realizing it. No one yells at you. No one forbids you. They simply plant seeds, and you let them grow. 1. Repeated exposure. The mind rejects the unfamiliar, but gradually accepts the familiar. When you're repeatedly exposed to a message, an image, or a belief, you begin to feel comfortable with it. Then it shifts to reasonable, then to truth. You're not forced to believe, you're made to get used to it. And the mind, which hates uncertainty, will choose the familiar even when it's wrong. 2. Repetition with variation. A message isn't repeated identically. It's echoed in different forms. an advertisement, a song, a touching story, a beloved character, and when you hear the same idea from multiple sources in various ways, you begin to assume it's true. The mind doesn't measure truth, it measures repetition. 3. Emotional anchoring. When an idea is linked to a powerful emotion, pride, fear, childhood memories, or unhealed wounds, it stops being just information and becomes a part of you. You don't just understand it, you feel it. And the emotion makes you cling to it because letting go would feel like letting go of a part of your identity. And then no one needs to control you. You control yourself using patterns that were deeply planted. So the real question isn't who is manipulating you, but how many of your beliefs are truly yours? And do you dare begin the cleansing of your mind from all the things that were programmed without your awareness? Psychological patterns of manipulation no one recognizes. Manipulation doesn't always require deception. Sometimes all it takes is to trigger existing psychological patterns, emotional habits, and unconscious responses formed long ago, which we're no longer even aware of. And that's why it operates so seamlessly without suspicion. 1. The need to be heard. People crave being heard, not just to share, but to feel that they matter. A good listener doesn't need to say anything special. They simply create a safe space. And in that space, they earn trust. Manipulators know this well. They get you to talk a lot, making you feel connected while they reveal nothing about themselves. 2. Loss aversion outweighs desire for gain. The human mind reacts more intensely to loss than to reward. A gift may bring you joy, but the fear of losing it creates panic. Skilled manipulators put you in a you're about to lose position, lose an opportunity, status, or a loved one to make you act quickly and impulsively without reflection. 3. Scarcity effect. What's rare feels more valuable. We're drawn to things that feel secret, rare, or only for the special few. When you believe you're gaining access to information others can't have, you lower your skepticism and open yourself to trust. This is why manipulation often comes wrapped in a sense of exclusivity or privilege. These psychological patterns aren't inherently bad, they're natural. But when you don't realize you're operating inside them, you're easily led without even knowing it. Awakening begins when your actions stop being reactive and become conscious. Only when you understand how you operate can you truly choose rather than be triggered. Nothing destroys control faster than a united group against you. Every system of control has one fatal weakness: the solidarity of the controlled. An individual can be persuaded, threatened, or manipulated, but when many people wake up together, share experiences, and unite under genuine values, no lie can divide them, and no technique can turn them against one another. That's why manipulators always fear unity. And they have good reason to, because power doesn't always lie in the one who gives the order, but in those who agree to follow. When people begin to notice common threads, begin to talk, share, question the same things, the control begins to fracture. Manipulation strategies aren't just about leading, they're about dividing before unity can take shape. An isolated person is easier to manipulate. An isolated person more easily believes they're wrong. An isolated person hesitates to speak up for fear they're the only one who feels something's off. To maintain control, manipulators skillfully plant doubt. They don't really understand you. Watch out, someone's been talking behind your back. You can't trust anyone except me. And once doubt seeps in, fragile connections are severed. A group ceases to be a group. It becomes scattered individuals, standing side by side but watching each other with suspicion. If you want to break free from manipulation, start by rebuilding connection. Don't distrust your voice if others begin to feel the same. And if you find yourself isolated from people who once felt close, it may not mean you're wrong. You may simply have been separated to weaken your power. Awakening isn't just a personal journey. It's a collective process, recognizing what's been controlling us and stepping out of it together. When you begin to doubt everything, even your own feelings, a skilled manipulator doesn't just get people to obey, they make others believe they're acting voluntarily. But the irony is this: when you manipulate others long enough, you start to lose trust in everything. You see a loving gaze and wonder, do they really care, or are they reacting to the version of me I crafted? You hear a compliment and question, Do they truly think that? Or did I lead them to that thought? You enter a relationship and can't tell do they love me or the experience of being shaped by me? Doubt begins in the tiniest moments, then spreads like a virus. It corrodes emotion. It blurs the line between what's real and what's not, and worse, it pulls you away from your own self. You were once the one in control, but now you're unsure if you even feel things for real. What once felt like victory now feels like uncertainty. And the very mind you used to control others now turns inward, questioning your own authentic feelings. This is the dark side of psychological power few speak about. It doesn't just make you lonely in a crowd, it isolates you inside your own heart. You no longer trust others, but more dangerously, you no longer trust your own emotions. Everything could be a product of influence, technique, manipulation. So what, if anything, is real? Maybe this is the turning point. Because when you start to ask that question, you begin to step out of the role you've been playing. You begin to seek emotions not for control, but to simply feel honestly again. To heal, you don't need to escape doubt. You just need to learn to listen to your most subtle sensations again. The emotions that aren't part of a strategy. The feelings that exist not to control, but to remind you that you're still human. Do you really want to control others? Or are you just afraid of being controlled? Some people spend their entire lives trying to control others. They want their partners to never leave. They want friends to follow their advice. They want employees to obey without question. They want others to admire, obey, love, and validate them. But look deeper, and behind that need for control isn't power. It's fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of not being loved. Fear of betrayal. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of losing everything if others are free. So we choose to control, not because we're strong, but because we don't trust ourselves to handle it if things don't go our way. Many think they enjoy being in charge, but if you ask them honestly, they may just be avoiding the helplessness they once felt. A neglected child may grow up with the need to control in order to feel safe. Someone betrayed may live constantly in a defensive state of micromanagement. But control doesn't bring freedom. It prolongs anxiety. The more you control, the less you trust, the tighter you grip, the more you fear loss. And then you don't live to connect, you live to avoid getting hurt. The deeper question is, who are you if you don't need to control anyone if they leave, if they don't follow, if they live their own life? What do you have left to hold on to? True freedom begins when you no longer need control because you've learned to trust in the wholeness within yourself. You can influence others, but you don't need to control them. You can be loved without controlling how others show their love. You can touch others not through tactics, but through your truth. Manipulation might make you powerful, but healing is what sets you free. Manipulation gives the illusion of power. You feel respected, feared, trusted. In control of every situation, you anticipate reactions, steer emotions, and shape behaviors in others' eyes. You are untouchable, calculated, composed, successful. But that's external power. What about your inner world? Behind the calm mask may lie a heart constantly tense, always on guard, afraid of being exposed, a mind running overtime, always calculating, controlling, anticipating, a person who seems successful to the world but who has lost connection with their own self. You are strong, but you are not free. You can control others, but you can't control the anxiety inside. Healing is the reverse journey, not from weakness to strength, but from false strength to genuine peace. No more chasing anyone, holding on to anyone, or needing to defeat anyone, just a quiet return to yourself. No longer driven by fear, expectations, or unhealed wounds. When you begin to heal, you no longer need to manipulate. You don't need to be misunderstood or understood. You don't need to win. You don't live to lead others. You live to be true to your own path. Your presence becomes your deepest influence, not because you're trying to create it, but because you are no longer caught in the need to control. That is the kind of freedom no one can take from you. No tactics, no victories, just peace within, and from there, everything shifts naturally. Power is not the ultimate goal. It's the test that leads you back to yourself. Many begin their journey with the craving for control, To control situations, people, their own lives, they believe that once they achieve power, they'll finally have the safety, recognition, and peace they've always longed for. But eventually they realize power is just a mask. It can make others obey, but it cannot quiet your restless heart. It can make you intimidating, but it cannot make you feel truly loved. When you finally reach power and see that it doesn't bring what you expected, that's when you arrive at a crucial turning point. Either you dive deeper into the game of control, or you return to the self you've been neglecting all along. All power, in the end, is a test of inner freedom. Can you stay grounded when others praise or attack you? Can you still be yourself when no one follows? Can you live authentically even when the power is gone? The truly strong are not those who make others follow, but those who remain themselves in the face of every influence. Perhaps the real purpose of power is not to hold someone else, but to place you in front of yourself and ask, who are you when no one listens? What do you live for when no one is watching? Do you have the courage to let go and still feel whole? Your true self doesn't need to control. It doesn't need to possess, to lead, or to win. It only needs to live truthfully and be at peace without pretending. That is the deepest form of power, one that doesn't need to be proven through conquest, but radiates quietly through authentic presence.